Good morning, Salado Youth and Salado Youth families. Thank you for joining us for worship and for making it this far to listen to the youth sermon section of our worship today. And I say sermon loosely. I guess it's a sermon. I don't know. Glad you could join us. And, in today's culture, it seems like every day there's some celebrity or somebody who gets in trouble for a tweet from the past or a picture from the past. And out of the woodwork, everybody comes in to give their opinions on it and on what's going on. And the internet allows us to do that. Social media allows us to do that. And in some senses, it's a good thing. We're working through things as a society. But I feel like sometimes we're really addicted to this. We're really addicted to this hot take that everybody's got to have on everything. We're addicted to our self-expression, to our own opinion, to telling our story. We always have to have our perspective and our story. And a lot of what we're seeing, we're encouraged to do is to talk about us and our perspective and our story and our this and our that, and living our best life, however you want to put it. And, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's okay to express yourself. It's okay to give your opinion. It's okay to talk about the things that you see in your life. But the passage today is, if you listen to it in Dr. Mosser's sermon, 1 Corinthians 12, 3 through 13, talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It is Pentecost Sunday, the Sunday when we remember that the Holy Spirit came into the world and continued to give the presence of Jesus in the church. And this passage talks a lot about the gifts that the Spirit gives. And I think one of the commentaries I read sort of went into this whole idea of maybe gift is the wrong word, and maybe we should look at this as a bit of about expressions of God, expressions of who God is. And you can see that in verse 7 of this passage. We're in 1 Corinthians 12:7. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So these gifts aren't about necessarily who we are or what we're good at. And I know we've talked about that some in youth group, like how can we use our talents and our skills to help others. And a lot of times we stop at kind of a shallow spot with that. Well, I'm good at baseball, so maybe I can influence the baseball kids. I'm good at theater, and maybe I can talk to theater kids. And all those things are good in and of themselves. But I think, what if we looked past that and started to see these gifts as expressions not of ourselves, but expressions of who God is? How can we change the question from what can I give to God to what does God want to say through me? Less about how I am gifted to what are God's gifts to me? How can I express God into the world? And importantly, how can I see God's expressions in others? I was reading a book the other day, and this man was telling a story about when his son was born, and he was showing his son to his pastor, and his pastor said, "This is your greatest teacher, learn from him." And how humbling that was to think about the child was teaching him, and what were the lessons that he could learn through his child. And that's unusual, right? Parents, we know everything, and we want to tell you how to do everything. And what if parents are meant to learn from their children just as much as children learn from their parents? What if we, as Christians, can learn just as much from each other as we can teach other people? What if we can think about our culture, as David mentioned, and how our culture can learn from other cultures, whether that's Salado culture or our Methodist church culture? What can we learn from other expressions of God? Because one of the things that we see from the Spirit is that the Spirit isn't contained by who we think the Spirit should be. Jesus says the Spirit goes where it wants, like the wind. And that tells me that I can see God's Spirit in a lot of different places and a lot of different expressions. So maybe if we turn that question around and think some this week about what can we learn? What expressions of God can we see in others, whether they're different from us, whether they're different from us in skin color, in economic status, where they live? What can we learn from them? How can we see God expressed through them? And then how can we turn around and express who God is to the world? and not express ourselves and our newest opinion and our newest perspective, but what is the perspective of God in different situations. So hope that gives you something to think about this week. Once again, love all of you guys. Hope that we can see you soon in person. Thanks for joining this morning.